After an old Oriental antique dealer dies and his shop is evicted by real estate developer Daniel Crump, Gizmo is taken in by genetic researcher Dr. John Roger. The catheter was found and brought to his lab in Manhattan's Crump Tower. Billy Peltzer works in the publicity department of Clump. Billy finds Gizmo and rescues him from the lab. Gizmo is splashed with water while hiding in Billy's desk, accidentally recreating an army of other gremlins. After drinking an experimental drug in the lab, the other gremlins transform into an astonishing assemblage of strange and exotic creatures and wreak havoc throughout the tower. The plot of Gremlins 2: The New Batch. The film takes place in New York City several years after the original, when Randall Peltzer, father of main character Billy Peltzer, purchases a Gizmo at a small store in New York's Chinatown. Gizmo is a strange, cute and good-natured furry creature named Mogwai. In the first movie, Billy was briefed on the rules regarding Mogwai. Keep Mogwai away from bright lights and water, and never feed them after midnight. Nevertheless, the Gizmo was later exposed to water and thereby regenerated. When the new Mogwai ate past midnight, it transformed into a savage monster with dark green, reptile-like skin and sharp teeth and claws. These monsters, called Gremlins, have wreaked havoc in Billy's small hometown of Kingston Falls. Gizmo's original owner, Mr. Wing, got Mogwai back after all the Gremlins were exterminated. Billy and Kate, now based in New York, are having trouble adjusting to their newfound powers. They both work for Cramp Enterprises, a large automated skyscraper in Manhattan called the Cramp Center, where Billy works in the design department and Kate as a tour guide. As part of a new development in the area, Mr. Wing, the owner of Gizmo and his brother, is approached by Crump Enterprises CEO Forster with an offer to finance the sale of the business to Cramp. Was taken. Wing refused, but died of old age soon after. His shop is then demolished, after which Gizmo is captured and taken to a lab in the Crump's office building run by Dr. Catheter, an evil mad scientist who threatens to dissect Gizmo. Billy eventually learns that Gizmo is inside the building and saves him. However, when one of Billy's bosses, Marla Bloodstone, takes Billy to a restaurant, Gizmo is stranded in the office and accidentally splashes water on him. As a result, Mogwai, Mohawk, the leader, Daffy, the craziest, George, the toughest, and Lenny, the dumbest, stuff Gizmo into an open sewer. Kate, who has been instructed by Billy to fetch Gizmo, instead comes and takes Daffy, believing it to be Gizmo. Meanwhile, the other three sneak into a restaurant after midnight to eat. Billy comes home to find Daffy messy and quickly realizes he's not Gizmo. He breaks into the building with Daffy, but is captured by security. Daffy quickly attacks the guards and flees. Security guards then lock Billy in, but Kate saves him. But the new batch didn't eat until after midnight. Mohawk quickly captures and tortures Gizmo as he escapes through the ventilation shaft. Billy tries to tell the Forsters about the Gremlins, but they don't believe them, and joke about Gremlins until Mohawk, temporarily separated from Gizmo, attacks them, but Billy shoos Billy away with a flashlight. Meanwhile, the other Gremlins blow up the microwave to start a fire, activating the sprinklers to multiply more. The new Gremlins are unable to leave the building as it is still daytime and sunlight is deadly to them. While imprisoned in a building, the Gremlins infiltrate the structure, including the genetic lab, where they use various chemical concoctions, believed to have been created by Dr. Catheter, that mutate them into various mutations of themselves. One gremlin drinks a concoction that turns him into an herbal gremlin depending on the formula he's drinking, another ingests hormones that make him even more intelligent, after which he speaks in a sophisticated voice actor, provided by Tony Randall of This. Brain Gremlin obtains glasses from an unknown source to display his newfound intelligence. Another gremlin develops bat-like wings and is later rendered immune to sunlight by Brain his gremlin. After that, this bat gremlin breaks through the walls of the lab and flies around the city. It soon attacks the Futtermans, Billy's neighbors from Kingston Falls. Murray Futterman pours cement on it, after which it lands on the Church of St. Eva Marie, a play on Eva Marie Saint, and becomes a gargoyle. Billy captures him in the telephone system. Mohawk seizes him attack on Gizmo and drinks a potion which enables him to change into a centauroid spider-gremlin hybrid. Meanwhile, and almost separately from the general impression of mayhem, Kate and Billy's boss Marla are trapped in Mohawk's spider web while Mohawk advances on them. Billy is tied up in a dentist's chair with Daffy about to experiment on him with a dentist drill, and Gizmo is tied up after being tortured by Mohawk. Gizmo grew tired of being pushed around by the other gremlins and managed to escape, building a bow and flaming arrows to use as weapons. Mr. Futterman enters the building and saves Billy by driving Daffy away with the dentist's lamp. They then search for Kate and Marla, and Gizmo kills the spider gremlin Mohawk. The brain gremlins then direct all the gremlins to the lobby when they are ready to leave the building, but they don't realize that the humans are gathering them in the lobby before the sun sets and setting a trap. Light of the sun. However, the plan goes awry as storm clouds obscure the sun. This means that gremlins can emerge from buildings and multiply by the thousands, rather than being destroyed. Knowing that he must act quickly, Billy has Mr. Fatterman spin the gremlin's water bladder. When the monsters start multiplying, Billy shoots electric gremlins at Robbie. Most of them electrocute and die, and the electric gremlins explode and disappear. After the crisis is resolved, Billy, Gizmo, and Grandpa Fred are promoted by a grateful Crump. Crump uses Billy's hometown as the basis for establishing his own town, which he calls Crump Corner. Billy and Kate take Gizmo home. The only survivor of the new group of gremlins is Greta, who is the last to wear a wedding dress and approach Forster to try to marry her. A post-credits scene features a Looney Tunes ring. Now Porky Pig comes out of the ring and says as usual, "That's it, folks!" But Daffy Duck interrupts again and takes over. After Daffy says the slogan, the back of the Warner Brothers billboard smashes it. He peeks his head to the left and says, "Fade out," and the segment ends. The background of Gremlins 2: The New Batch. The original Gremlins was such a financial success that Warner Brothers immediately asked director Joe Dante to make a sequel. Dante thought Gremlins had a fitting ending and therefore a sequel would only benefit, so he declined. Additionally, the original film was a draining experience for Dante, and he wanted to take the next step. Work on Gremlins 2 continued without him as the studio contacted various directors and writers. Stories under consideration included sending Gremlins to cities like Las Vegas and cities like Mars. After these ideas failed, the studio returned to Dante. Dante agreed to make the sequel following the rare promise of full creative control over the film. It was also attached with a budget 3 times that of the original film. Dante later admitted that too much time between films at this point might make Gremlins 2 less appealing. The film was released in 1990, an era when, as the filmmaker later noted, cable television, genetics, and frozen yogurt were becoming more popular and influential. This left its mark on Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2 certainly exaggerated what was being shown on cable TV at the time, but as the filmmakers pointed out in 2002, today's audience may be missing the humor. There is. Cable TV has since expanded to offer a similar variety. 1990s genetics are reflected in the lab in Gremlins 2, and frozen yogurt is what Mogwai eat after midnight. The various gremlin types in the movie. Vegetable gremlins: living plants with green skin, ears of lettuce, lips of carrots, etc. with peppers, red, orange, yellow. When drinking greenish-blue vegetable serum becomes a creature of. Brain gremlin: a gremlin drinks brown brain serum and develops high intelligence with a human voice while wearing glasses. Bat gremlins. Gremlins drink brown bat serum and transform into bat-like creatures with wings and bat ears. Brain gremlin then injects him with a genetic sunscreen, causing the mutant gremlin to attack humans while flying freely under the sun to see if the sun sets. Electric gremlins. Gremlins drink red electro serum and become blue electro creatures with raw energy. Greta. A gremlin drinks a female serum of unknown color and becomes a female gremlin. Stripe/Mohawk. He steals spider serum, drinks it, and becomes a large hybrid called Spider Gremlin. And used mutant gremlin. Rhino gremlin. Elephant gremlin. Possible mutations. Milk-licking gremlin. The special effects used in the movie. For special effects, the original film relied on would-be director Chris Wallace. Dante commissioned Rick Baker to create effects for Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Baker wasn't interested in Gremlins 2, The New Batch because he wasn't the creator and thought it would be a high-effort project to succeed Wallace. He was eventually persuaded to take the job as it was suggested to make Gremlins and Mogwai more diverse. When Gizmo was bred in the first game, the offspring were very similar to Gizmo except for the leader's stripes. Here, the 4 Mogwai Gizmo produces each possesses their own distinct personalities and physical features. Additionally, each Mogwai has a name, although the names were used in the script and never actually spoken aloud in the film. 2 of the Mogwais were George, black without a stripe and a caricature of Edward G. Robinson, and Lenny, buck-toothed, named for the principal characters in Of Mice and Men, whom they resemble in both appearance and demeanor. Daffy displays manic behavior and the leader, Mohawk, named for his mohawk hairstyle. Based on the original film character Stripe, Frank Welker also voices the Mohawk. Both the Mogwai and Gremlins versions of Stripes had first stripes, but Baker came up with the idea of giving the Mohican Mogwai first stripes and the Mohican Gremlins a more scaly one. Rice Field. Gizmos have also been redesigned. The doll has become larger overall, and the design has been simplified. Dante said Gizmo may be less realistic in Gremlins 2, the new batch, but as a result Gizmo is able to convey more emotion. After that, the Mogwai evolve and breed into Gremlins, and they become even more diverse by rampaging in biological laboratories and ingesting various drugs. One turns into a sunlight-resistant hybrid with a bat, thus becoming the Bat Gremlin. Mohawk becomes part spider. One becomes part vegetable gremlin, as Dante named it, and another consumes a drug and turns into a female, Greta, with shiny red lips and mascara. Yet another has acid thrown onto his face, quickly presenting a mask of the Phantom of the Opera. As with the first, puppetry was involved, and some of the puppets were mechanical. An actor holding a puppet would actually have to have wires strapped to him. Gremlins 2, the new batch also includes more stop-motion animation than the first film. The Bat Gremlin was portrayed through some stop-motion animation. Film technology since the original had improved, and as a result, the creatures can be seen walking more. In fact, Gizmo is able to dance, although this scene took the longest to make. While there are more Gremlins in Gremlins 2 than the original, this still took a long time to make possible, with the filming lasting 5 months. Many of the effects had to be finished after the actors had finished their work. The plotting of Gremlins 2, the new batch. Giving greater control over the film, Dante developed a production that he later described as one of his most unconventional studio films of all time. Dante added material that he felt Warner Brothers would not have allowed for a Gremlins sequel had they not wanted it. He was allowed to break many filmmaking rules and later claimed that this film was the one that had the most personal impact on him. Dante envisioned Gremlins 2 as a satire on Gremlins and their sequels in general. Another of his basic descriptions of Gremlins 2 was, as Dante put it, that the film gets very cartoonish within the first hour. Nominated screenwriter Charlie Haas incorporated the basic storyline of the Gremlins' move to New York City into the project, while making Billy's boss, a character named Crump, the center of the new disaster. Also conceived. When Warner Brothers executives became concerned about the cost of portraying Gremlins attacking entire cities, Haas came up with the idea to limit the plot to director Daniel Crump's smart buildings. Haas also incorporates much of the material into the script that proved too elaborate to produce, such as the use of a cow-hamster hybrid running on a lab treadmill. In line with Dante's desire to satirize the original film, the sequel features meta-references and self-referential humor. It also features a cameo from film critic Leonard Martin. He denounces it by holding up a copy of the original Gremlins video, just like he actually did. However, his violent attacks are interrupted when a gremlin pounces on him. Because of this scene, one scholar called Dante one of the greatest pranksters in modern cinema. Also, when Billy tries to explain the safety precautions regarding Mogwai to the staff inside the building, the staff find it very silly and question Billy about the application of the rules. This scene arose from the fact that the filmmakers themselves thought the rules were unreasonable, and some of the questions in the scene were based on questions from fans of the original film. At one point in the film, Dante tries to draw the audience into the story by making it appear that Gremlins have taken over the theater where Gremlins 2 is set. The film appears to be interrupted by Gremlins, who performs shadow puppets on a white screen. Professional wrestler Hulk Hogan then makes a cameo appearance, intimidating Gremlins into leading the rest of Gremlins 2. This joke was inspired by a similar stunt in William Castle's film Tingler, 1959. The studio was concerned that people would walk out of the theater thinking the film had actually broken. So Dante arranged to get some people together for a preview of the film so that the sequence could be recorded. Once that scene was shown, the actual audience enjoyed it and stayed in the cinema. Dante later referred to this scene as one of his most popular jokes in Gremlins 2. When Gremlins 2 was released on home video, the filmmakers changed the scene to make it look as if Gremlins' VCR had broken. This time, actor John Wayne forces Gremlins to continue with the film, but Wayne died in 1979, so a voice appearance was required. Notably, a portion of the 1943 film Falling Hair starring Bugs Bunny and Gremlins appears in this version. The original version of the film was longer, but executive producer Steven Spielberg claimed that some scenes were cut because there were too many Gremlins. A deleted scene shows 3 of the main Gremlins, Daffy, Lenny and George, thinking that Grandpa Fred's show is scary, sneak into TV host Grandpa Fred's studio and help him with the show. Was reflected. Now let's move on to the review. Gremlins, 1984, was a huge success, becoming the highest-grossing film of the year in many countries. Director Joe Dante, whose career has been markedly inconsistent since Gremlins, has returned from the original for the sequel, along with most of the cast and engineering team. Gremlins 2: The New Batch couldn't replicate the box office success of its predecessor, but it certainly has a pretty big budget. Gremlins 2: The New Batch doesn't try to get around the fact that it's essentially the same movie as its predecessor. With some inventive twists and the introduction of a more technologically sophisticated and diverse variety of gremlins, things grow in scale, but one fact can never be obscured by him. It is ultimately resolved by its own stupidity. In the first movie, pretty much anything resembling the storyline was removed and it was just a series of gremlin gags. You might think a movie like this has no limits, but Dante proves they do. Here Dante completely derails his predecessor's villainy, turning Gremlins 2: The New Batch into his ever-expanding screwball comedy. The Gremlins interrupt the film in the scene where the theater manager summons wrestling megastar Hulk Hogan sitting in the stands and coerces them into submission. There was a scene to or Gremlins slaughter film critic Leonard Martin while he disparagingly reviews the predecessor. And the end credits with Bugs and Daffy goofing around the movie just feels so unreal. Rick Baker's Gremlins are smarter and far more deadly than ever. It also feels like the film's technical sophistication gets in the way of the gag. A few sequences where Gremlins filling the entire lobby chanting, "New York, New York!" Spider his Gremlins firing electric bolts and transforming into gargoyles seem to exist just for the sake of it. So engineers can be proud. Nothing about this movie boasts the laughably vicious, farcical pacing of its predecessor. The little green hooligans who nearly destroyed the Spielberg world of Anytown, USA in Gremlins are back in this sequel by invading American corporations. In a state-of-the-art office building that also houses a cable network and a research department that experiments with genetic mutations, the reptilian creature wreaks havoc while waiting for the sun to set, the damage spreading across unsuspecting Manhattan. Increase. Some of the cultural banter is more nuanced than others, but it's rife with quirky and anarchic narratives, replacing much of the predecessor's dark comedy with Looney Tunes-esque nonsense, while the sequel also has a lot to offer. It thoroughly dismantles the need for. Much of Charles A. Haas' script follows the same plot as Chris Columbus' original, so this attempt at self-referential humor isn't always obvious, but it's part of the film's weirdness and hilarity. It's a department, adding just a pinch of sarcasm and insane absurdity to give the whole dish a little more flamboyance. Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates will reprise their roles as Billy and Kate, who are now based in New York but still innocent and innocent. The reward is to have Kate's horror story punctuated by impatience, or have Billy explain the rules of Mogwai, exposing their arbitrary nature. Miller and Jackie Joseph as Fattermans, also returning after years of recovery, are forced to relive their past experiences. The convenience of a simple action to get things started, Still pretty funny in this case, leads to a young couple getting their gizmos and more back, but then painfully makes 4 new friends. This horror comedy adheres to the cliché that sequels are bigger than their predecessors, but maintains the same formula, with a reawakened Stripe with a far more menacing appearance that eventually evolves into a Black Widow hybrid. It is characterized by but it's not a full iteration, and the sequel also includes some memorable new faces like Blaine, Daffy and Greta, George, modeled after Edward G. Robinson, and Lenny, a twisted but delightfully insidious homage to John Steinbeck's classic novel. Gremlins may second not be up to the standards of its predecessor, but it certainly comes pretty close, with irreverent and satisfying laughs. The evil little monsters show their love of all things horror by caricaturing their own movies. Christopher Lee gives the role as the evil Dr. Catheter has the hallmarks of a Hammer film. Yes, the name makes you laugh, and there's the weird Ray his Harryhausen moment when Bat his Gremlin explodes for the first time. The tongue-in-cheek humor continues with a Grandpa Munster lookalike turned late-night TV host turned news reporter, and John Astin, best known as the perpetually mad Gomez Adams, is all about it. It continues even when you become an unconscious caller of the misfortune of the world. No matter how sliced, diced, or fried, this new group of gremlins is subversive, funny, and a hilarious mockery. The Blu-ray Edition. Warner has released Gremlins 2 on his Blu-ray in heavily sanitized 1080p. A clear improvement over the previous presentation, especially in terms of clarity and resolution. Fine objects and structural details are clearly defined not only in Gizmo's tiny hairy body, but also in the clothing and complexion of the human cast. Also, the Gremlin's reptilian scaly body is very distinctive, giving it a slimy appearance. The print used, however, can be seen as old, as it is heavily blurred throughout, but the thin veil of grain remains intact and uniform, giving the image a decidedly cinematic appeal. I am giving. Contrast is a bit dull, on the lower end of the grayscale. Highlights tend to be slightly distorted, and in some scenes with bright lights flashing into the camera, it looks a bit too intense and painful to the eye. Black levels are solid and shadow detail is good, but overall it looks mostly dull. The colors, especially the primary colors, are very bold, but they don't have the energetic pop you'd expect from this kind of comedy. After all, it's not lost entirely, and looks pretty good in high definition most of the time. Blu-ray Edition's bonus review. DVD bonus have carried over. Audio commentary director Joe Dante, Zach Galligan, writer Charlie Haas and producer Michael Fennell join us for this boring but interesting commentary. The dialogue mostly focuses on production history and what made the sequel more satirical. The men talk at length about the humor and various gags that are reflected on the screen, and it is a voice that fans can fully enjoy. Making of Gremlins 2, SD, 6 minutes, standard EPC play featuring cast and crew interviews discussing characters and plot. Outtake SD, 22 minutes, with optional director commentary. This is a collection of over 20 different deleted scenes of her with more jokes like Lee's nod to the Hammer movie she starred in as Dracula, George Gremlin's performance punching Greta, and more. Top hats and fruits are punched in the face, and a lengthy version of the Looney Tunes intro plays. Gag reel, SD, 6 minutes, various and pretty funny scenes where glitches occur during the making of a movie. Alternative sequence, SD, 3 minutes, the alternate version found only on VHS of his where gremlins interrupt the movie is just as funny as the official sequence. This scene was originally available on DVD as an Easter egg, but is now more easily accessible. Trailer, SD, an original theatrical preview completes the package. All the references to the original Gremlins in the movie. Kate at one point in the film talks about her family tragedy that happened to her early in her story, parodying why she hated Christmas in the original film. Kate talked about her father's accidental death in her previous work. In Gremlins 2, she recounts Abraham's encounter with Flasher, who resembles her President Lincoln. Billy has a photo of Kingston Falls, the location of her first film, in her private room. In this movie, as in the first movie, Gremlins flash at Kate. She reacts by shoving the creature across the room. Like the original movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is Gremlins' favorite movie. In the film, Fatterman tells Billy that his father, Rand Pelzer, who worked on Bathroom Buddy, was working on reversible toilet paper or something, but I'm not sure. Told. George the Gremlin notices the microwave and has his fellow Gremlin Lenny throw a few pots into it before shutting it down and switching it on, causing it to explode within seconds. This could be interpreted as revenge for what happened in the first movie where gremlins were destroyed in the microwave.